Not far from our home, there was a narrow path full of trees. The place was said to be covered in mystery because of the many beings that showed up there. I was one of those who experienced such things. At that time, Wanning was just 17 years old. He was studying in secondary school and passed through that path every day. In the morning, nothing seemed strange, but as the afternoon came, the air slowly changed. Wanning didn't like to stay late, but he couldn't leave his sibling, as his parents always reminded him to never leave his younger siblings alone. Being the eldest, it was his responsibility. He knew that if he failed, there would be a punishment from his father. One afternoon, as they walked along that path, they couldn't help but hurry. It was getting dark, and their home was still far away. He kept scolding his sibling for walking so slowly and stopping to rest frequently. After a few minutes, when he couldn't take it anymore, he grabbed his sibling's bag and said, "If we get scolded later, you'll see what happens." Hearing this, his sibling was clearly scared of him. Instead of stopping, even though tired, his sibling tried to keep going. As they walked, everything seemed fine until they reached the middle of the path. There were no other people around, and you could feel the wind's eerie whistle. The silence of the surroundings gave a strange presence. Despite the fear, Wanning tried not to give in. But a few minutes later, something blocked their path. It looked like a small person with a strange appearance. He described the being as an old person about the height of a 10-year-old child. It was naked, with brown skin, a sharp nose, and carried a bag that seemed heavy. As soon as the being saw them, it quickly crossed to the other side of the path, where the thick forest was. After seeing it, Wanning and his sibling chose to run back to school, thinking it was safer there. When they saw the end of the path, Wanning ran even faster and noticed his sibling was no longer behind him. He tried calling out, but there was no answer. He couldn't find any trace, so he sought help from nearby houses. After a while, he met a man and tearfully told him what happened. At first, the man didn't believe him, but when he realized Wanning was telling the truth, he quickly accompanied him to the village center. As they walked through the path, Wanning learned that such things indeed happened in that place. Though rare, the man firmly said that what Wanning experienced was real. He added that usually, when children go missing there, they are never seen again. Sometimes they are seen, but only as spirits, according to witnesses. Don't be too scared. Those things I mentioned are just talk around here. It's better if you talk to Grandpa Ancho, the man said after sharing what he knew. Upon hearing this, Wanning tried to stay strong while remembering his sibling's happy face before disappearing. When they arrived at the shaman's house, they were greeted by an old man busy talking to visitors. If they hadn't approached, the old man wouldn't have noticed them. When the old man saw Wanning crying, he stopped talking and slowly turned his attention to him. "Don't drown in your problems, boy. Everything has a solution. You just need to believe. Now, tell me, what happened to you?" When Grandpa Ancho asked, Wanning shared everything he experienced in detail, hoping it would be easier for the old man to understand what happened. During their conversation, the shaman revealed that Wanning's sibling was in danger. Hearing this, Wanning's world crumbled. He wanted so badly to see and talk to his parents, but they were far away. He didn't have the courage to walk alone for fear of ending up like his sibling. After their talk, Grandpa Ancho advised Wanning to stay in the village and wait for his family. He also warned him not to cross that path if he didn't want to get hurt. The old man mentioned that the path might be looking for a new offering to maintain the magic of that place. The offerings helped feed the beings living there and made the plants grow, explaining why it was always covered in thick fog in the morning. The shaman said that because of these offerings, the place became a feeding ground for Wendigos when there were decaying bodies. They had encountered these creatures several times but couldn't get rid of them. Even if they tried to eliminate them, they would always return when another person disappeared. Hearing these stories, Wanning almost lost his mind, thinking of what to do to save his sibling. He repeatedly begged the old man for help, but unfortunately, the shaman couldn't fulfill his request. Grandpa Ancho admitted that he was too weak and had no strength to fight so many beings. Without other shamans to help, their efforts to find his sibling would be in vain. 2 hours later, he saw his parents hurriedly approaching the shaman's house with lamps and some men from their place. All of them wanted to hear his story. When his father got close, he calmly asked, "Son, explain." "Don't worry. I won't hurt you. You're not at fault. We were negligent. That's why we didn't notice the possibilities like this." After his father's reassurance, he hugged Wanning tightly as if to show how much he mattered. A few minutes later, as his father let go, Wanning didn't hesitate to tell his experience. His father listened intently until he ordered their companions to prepare. After that, his father advised him they would go home. As soon as he said this, he put his arm around Wanning and started walking towards the place where his sibling disappeared. When they reached the middle of the path, they saw nothing but the thick trees along the way. The tall grass made it hard to see through. They thought they wouldn't find anything, but after a few seconds, they saw someone crawling not far from where they were looking. Seeing this, his father shouted and they followed the figure into the forest. Even without knowing what was inside, they didn't care as long as they could catch the figure. Despite his fear, Wanning followed his father. When they reached the middle of the forest, they stopped as they noticed the figure's trail disappeared. They cautiously listened to the surroundings until they heard faint growls circling the area. Before we continue with the exciting part of the story, I encourage you to subscribe and like this video. Also, press the bell icon so you'll be the first to know about our new uploads. Thank you. Let's continue. It started with a soft rustling sound, accompanied by the scraping noise of long claws while it growled. Wanning's father knew the creature was nearby. To be prepared, they avoided moving or making any noise. Wanning was beside his father, holding a big stick he got from the old man's yard. The growling lasted for a few minutes until it suddenly stopped. When they realized the creature was no longer watching them, Wanning's father signaled to his companions. As they were about to leave the woods, Wanning was shocked when a Wendigo suddenly grabbed one of their companions walking just a few meters away. When the companion fell to the ground, his father quickly attacked the Wendigo with his machete. While his father wrestled with it, their companions also helped until they managed to drive the creature away. But before it could escape, his father slashed it near its left eye. After the incident, the Wendigo quickly ran away, crying and laughing. When it was gone, Wanning saw their companion struggling for life because of a deep stab wound in his stomach. Seeing the critical condition of their companion, his father immediately provided first aid to stop the bleeding. Then, they quickly carried him out of the woods and back to their village. After several hours, even though it was very late at night, they continued to help their injured companion. Instead of going home, Wanning patiently waited for his father to finish what he was doing. At 2 a.m, they finally decided to go home. As they walked, his father mentioned that he wouldn't stop until he found Wanning's sibling. His father added that if the only way to get him back was to fight those creatures, he would do it without hesitation. Hearing his father's words, Wanning immediately agreed, saying, "I'll go with you, Dad. I won't just sit at home while you risk your lives." His father smiled at him but remained silent. A little later, when they had nothing more to discuss, they decided to rest. The next day, even before the rooster crowed, Wanning's father was busy sharpening his weapons. He also sought protective items from the shamans they knew, along with some knowledge about the creatures they were facing. According to their stories, there was no doubt they were dealing with Wendigos. The shaman was sure it wouldn't stop, especially since his father had heard it. The shaman had a strong feeling. These creatures would try to come to their place for revenge. The shaman added that if they found themselves in such a situation, they should expect that more people would get hurt and die in their village. The shaman advised that they had no choice but to face it. Wendigos are known to harbor anger and hatred towards those who harm them. They don't easily show mercy, especially to ordinary people like them. After the shaman revealed that, he promised to help if the creatures invaded their place. Hearing this, Wanning's father was very grateful for the promise made to them. In the afternoon, while their companions gathered, they noticed two men coming out of the path leading to the neighboring village. At first glance, they couldn't help but be suspicious because of the strangers' unusual clothing. Wanning thought they were foreigners, but when they spoke in their dialect, they realized these men had been living in their place for a long time. Without saying anything, Wanning's father confronted the guests, even though he had no basis for his accusations. Hearing this, the man closest to them just smirked and said, "You should already know who we are. Why do we need to introduce ourselves? You must know why we're here, right? What you're doing is good to make us happy." As the man said those words, they noticed his lips and eyes turning black. His skin became rough, and his two arms grew longer. Seeing this, Wanning's father didn't hesitate to draw his machete and attempt to stab the creature. But before the blade could pierce its skin, the companions witnessed how it bounced back as if it had hit rubber. When his hand returned to his side, he tried to slash again, but this time, the man grabbed the blade. "Do it more slowly. Why don't I just use this to end your life?" After saying this, the man forcibly took the machete from his father's hand. When it was about to slip from his grasp, his father tried to retrieve it, but he noticed the strange strength of the creature. He tried several times, but it didn't work. With no other choice, his father let go of the machete. Seeing what happened, their companions hurried to help him. After a few minutes, when they had surrounded the creatures, the shaman who had promised to help arrived. Seeing the Wendigos, they just grinned and walked away as if they felt no fear. A few meters later, the man who had argued with his father said they should not look for the missing child because they had eaten him the previous night. He added that if they wanted revenge, they were free to enter the woods. The group would be waiting there. And if they didn't dare, the creatures would bring the fight to their village. The man also promised he wouldn't show mercy to any of them. After giving this warning, they saw him disappear into the woods. Seconds later, he was completely gone. Realizing this, they immediately went to the shaman for help. None of them wanted to let the creature's actions go unpunished, fearing they might be targeted one by one. Hearing their pleas, the shaman advised them to prepare. He added that they wouldn't go to the creature's place but would wait for them to enter their territory. Choosing to fight in the village gave them a higher chance of victory. The old man also said he would give them weapons and protection to help them against the creatures. After the shaman said this, he took them to his small house. There, he whispered a plan to their group to prepare for the upcoming conflict. During their discussion, the old man mentioned that the Wendigo's main weakness was their limited vision at night. They relied on their sense of smell to find their food or the body of someone close to death. The old man also warned that despite their advantage, they still needed to be careful. Once the Wendigos became familiar with their scents, they could be tracked no matter where they hid. Hearing this, The group listened closely to everything the old man said. In their minds, they realized the plan was more challenging than they had expected. As dusk fell, they decided not to go home. As darkness enveloped the place, they stayed outside, waiting for the creatures to appear. By 9 p.m., as the surroundings were wrapped in silence, they noticed a strange smell spreading through the area. It smelled like rotting meat, giving everyone an eerie feeling. They thought that would be the extent of their experience. But after a few more hours, the creatures began to make their presence felt. According to Wanning's father, the Wendigos were unfazed by their group despite the protections placed around the shaman's house. The situation lasted for several weeks. Until, for some inexplicable reason, the creatures suddenly left them alone. At first, his father wondered why. But when he returned home, he found out Wanning had been missing for several days. His mother had no idea where he went. All she remembered was that Wanning said he was going to buy food in the village. Since then, he never returned. They asked their neighbors, but unfortunately, even they had no idea what happened to him. Because of this, the shaman realized that Wanning had sacrificed his life for all of them. They couldn't blame him, knowing that each passing night put their group in greater danger. The shaman admitted that without Wanning's sacrifice, there was a high chance someone else would have died. Since Wanning's disappearance, they never saw the Wendigos again. Although some said the creatures still roamed the woods, they no longer disturbed the people passing by. But what surprised everyone was when Wanning began to appear in the woods with his sibling's spirit. Many witnessed this. Since then, they understood his sacrifice to the Wendigos. To this day, the story of Wanning and his sibling, victims of the Wendigos, is still widely known in their place. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe and like this video. Also, if you have an opinion, just write it in the comments section and I'll be happy to read it. Thank you. Until the next video.